Shalom. Hello, hello. Now we have more people. Shalom, shalom. Some people just came in the building, so I hear 2 people in the building, and I know another 2 are planning on coming in person too. So, hello.
Hi.
Welcome. Sorry, we had a little bit of a rowdy group of 6th and 7th graders today, so I apologize for the things thrown everywhere.
Going on your judging list.
Long list.
Let it be known I did bring this back.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
That's a nice bookmark. I like that.
With this?
Yeah.
Oh, so I went to Barnes & Noble and just bought a bunch of them. There's one about now, reading, and all the other fun ones.
Nice. Hello, Anna and Mara. We've got Mark and Emma here.
Hi.
Mark is walking around.
As if I didn't do enough of that today.
Not enough walking. We will wait another 3 minutes because I know that Jade and Candace are coming today, and it's Jade's birthday, so I don't want to start without her. That sounded like a door.
I think that was the back.
Oh, was that Mark? Okay.
But yeah, but you're right.
Still
Jade and Candace are fairly consistent at coming exactly like 3 minutes by.
Are they? Oh, I didn't know that.
But that's my watch time. But well, no, I don't think it's deliberate on their part. I just think they're always.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
That's just their way of doing timing.
Well, in the way that no matter what I do, I always seem to arrive like a few minutes early. Even if I'm like, no, I can turn up a bit, later. Like, so I'm like, it's like a casual start to the party, Whatever.
See, I'm the always show up 5 minutes late, no matter how hard I try type of person.
Yeah, so like just the same, but on the other side of the equation.
Yeah. All right. So we'll wait, number 1, for Mark to get back in the room. Number 2, possibly for Jade and Candace to get here. But if they're not here in 2 minutes, we'll get started. How have you been?
I've been good. Rabbi, how have you been?
I've been okay. Long day. Y'all get to see me at my wackiest, because Wednesdays I start at time I start, 10:30, and then end an hour and a half from now.
I keep forgetting that rabbis and priests don't just work on the weekend, because that's when we're in the service. So my brain just always goes, wait, they work on the
Yeah, you'd think that there would be less to do during the week.
Yeah, there's always a lot of stuff behind the scenes.
At least like with the weekends, it's all kind of consistent. I know what the service is going to look like. Shalom! Happy birthday!
Oh, thank you. Are they exactly 3 minutes?
It's 4 minutes.
I was wrong. Sorry, I was convinced that you were always.
They may have opened the door at 3.
That's true. Sorry. My Germanic anal retentiveness about timings. I swore I had you guys down to the minute.
We were close.
All right. Hello. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Hey. Ooh, there's Dan today.
I have schoolwork to do, so that's what I'll be down here doing.
Okay. Sounds good. Have fun grading papers and creating curriculum.
You do it for you and just put big X's on it.
So, do you do the thing that the kids always said teachers do, which is, like throw them and wherever they land in like a circle is the grade?
No.
I do.
That's fun. All right, welcome everybody. Now we're refocusing. Good to see y'all. Is the computer set up okay? Or the TV set up?
Oh, good. It's perfect.
Good. All righty. So before we dive into one of our more text-based days, there's been a lot going on in the past 2 weeks. So we had, I guess that's what is that, senior events calendar. So if anybody here wants to know the senior events that are going on, the senior games, you're welcome to.
I'm not sure.
We're not on a page right now,
Oh, okay.
but we've had a lot going on the past 2 weeks. a couple weeks ago we had Purim. In fact, exactly was it only 2 weeks ago?
Mhm.
Only 2 weeks ago we had Purim.
Because they made me a borderline personality disorder.
Mm-hmm. And then last week, or this past Shabbat, the reason why we weren't here last week is we had 7 people who went through the process of Beit Din and Mikvah, and are now officially halachically Jewish. And so we had a big celebration for them this weekend. And so I think some of the people in this room were at a lot of those things. So my big question is do you have any questions or things that stuck out to you about those experiences?
Well, one, it was very emotional because it was like, oh, hello, I just met you all, but hey, it's a family thing.
This Saturday, past Saturday?
Yeah. I did like the explanations of the names and how it was picked, and the little blessings for them all. That was kind of cool.
So everyone chose their own name for a particular reason.
Right.
Yeah. Mazal Tov, Candace, by the way.
And I love your tallit, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yes, I was looking at that. I didn't see it when I came in, but I'm like, you may not have that for very long.
Great.
That creator on Etsy, she's incredible.
Either Emma or Jade, were there any questions that came up for you either for Purim or this past weekend?
And I hate I didn't make it this weekend, but Purim, I guess it comes back to like you just feel that familial community aspect of all of it. It just, those moments of group participation and just seeing everyone here together is always really, really nice.
Yeah.
Because we haven't really gotten to do that for like 2 years.
That too.
Like since I've been
Right.
here, we haven't had a community thing. Everything was online, and it was just online's cool, but you definitely miss the experience.
Right. There's something to Jewish community that's
Yes.
something different, and especially 2 weeks in a row we had Purim, and then basically the same amount of people came for Shabbat this weekend, and so
It was fun, but it was also a little bit exhausting.
It was a lot, yeah.
I didn't want to put a negative connotation.
No,
on it,
you
but
can,
I
though.
needed to recharge at the end.
Right.
Yeah, it's a shame I didn't get to go to Purim, my job interview, but I'm hoping that's a good luck sign that it turned out on the same day.
I think it's gonna be good.
I hope so. I find out first week of April. But yeah, sorry,
Just
it's
come
not
out.
What is this?
I had to miss Purim because Dallas, UT Southwestern interview day for geriatric psychiatry fellowship was on
wow.
Wednesday. I didn't think at the time, but now I'm hoping that was a good sign because you know. But yeah, but the Saturday itself, I'm really missing because what you guys said, like the Saturday was good, but the Purim was like way more, intimate kind of feeling.
Yeah.
So I really sucks I missed it. But next year, it will be next year.
I think while we're on Purim, the one thing that I was sad that you missed was the project Rabbi Feivel had been working on with the Megillah,
With the scroll,
the
Megillah scroll, yeah.
tropes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that was very intriguing to me because it's the first time I've ever been up close with anything that had fresh ink on it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like, because there was normally when you see it, it's like faded, it's been there for a while. No, this was clear distinction. You could tell fresh ink. This is this. Here's the little marks, even though I don't know what everything does yet.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very interesting.
Yeah. So what Mark is referring to is this year we used, thanks to Rabbi Feivel, we used a new Megillah scroll, a new scroll for the Book of Esther. That was designed for us by a female soferet, by a female scribe. And she, often when you see the Book of Esther, it shows up just like the Torah with no vowels, no trope, no punctuation. But this time it actually had all of the punctuation and all of the trope on it, so that it's a lot easier to read, and it's still halachic, it still goes by Jewish law. It's just not what the custom is.
The Torah has no punctuation?
The Torah has no punctuation, no trope marks, no musical notation.
Does it have vowels?
No vowels.
No vowels, so you have to really figure it out.
So you have to learn, when you're reading the Torah, before, in the weeks before you read Torah,
Yeah.
or depending on how long it takes you
Yeah.
to learn. For some people, it'll take a couple months, but after a while, it might take a day. You practice with the vowels and with the musical notation, and then when you're actually at the Torah, you don't have any of the vowels or musical notation.
So this must have been developed pretty early on in the form of writing, because obviously they added that stuff later when they realized this wasn't really, but they kept the Torah exactly, you know,
Right.
as is.
So the Torah was there are copies of the Torah that show up before the Masoretic stuff was added. So the Masoretic stuff is the vowels and the trope markings and the punctuation wasn't the Masoretes, but the vowels and the trope markings were the Masoretes in about 900 of the Common Era, but the Torah was written way before then.
Oh, it's really been kept. I'm just like, sorry, it just never occurred to me that it didn't have punctuation, because of course I couldn't read it. But you're right. Oh, that's just, I don't know, that's just pretty awesome that they kept it exactly the same, like even early written language for, you know.
Right. And what's cool too is that some of the words are pronounced differently than they're written in the Torah, and you got to learn all of that. It's kind of fun, but not easy.
It's a lot for you to keep going on in your head.
Yeah. It looks like you're both listening and doing work at the same time.
Yeah.
So was there anything that stuck out to you about either about the mikveh beitin process or this weekend or Purim? Or questions you had?
It's been so much. I don't know.
It's been a lot.
So much. A lot of emotions and moving stuff. It was really scary to be up there. And like
To be up on the bima?
yeah. And
Did you see me going?
I saw nothing because I was embarrassed. I was scared. Not, and that's a horrible thing to say. I was very excited and proud to do that, but nerve wracking.
Mm-hmm.
That's and like touching it and stuff, you know.
Yeah, it's new.
Yeah.
What was
What
your
to do that again?
experience with the official mikvah?
Oh, like
was it as equally as emotional too, or?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Like I like the whole process of getting ready to go in it, like the like cleaning yourself and making sure there's nothing on your fingernails and all that. Like that was so intentional and like I don't know, it was really cool. But actually, like going in, I really like I knew it would be moving and stuff, but like being in the water and like understanding like what it meant and like the weight of it and stuff was like I kind of just like cried afterward,
Okay.
like in the water. And it was really cool. I was telling the Bait Dean that I watched the episode of Sex and the City the day before where Charlotte goes in the mikveh to like kind of prepare myself for that, and it was even more than I could have imagined. So it was really cool.
Okay.
I still have to watch that. I had no idea until you said that.
Season 6, episode 4.
Okay.
Well,
good to know.
now it's on our to-do list.
Good to know. I'm glad it was a good experience.
I was
I
curious.
want to do it again.
You can, and mikvah is not something that has to be reserved for just the conversion process, right? Mikvah is something that you do anytime you feel like you just want something new, and it doesn't just have to be in a building. It's if you find a body of natural water, um, anywhere that's secluded enough that you can take your clothes off, then that's somewhere you can do mikveh as well. Traditionally, we do mikveh both after big life events, before big life events, and most often women will do mikveh when their periods are over once a month. So a lot of times people will um, they won't have sex again. So traditionally we're going to go over this in a few weeks, but we don't have sex with our significant other from the first day of the cycle until a week after that, and then that's where we do mikveh, and then that's when again that's kind of the mark for when to start sex again, which is hard to do in Shreveport because we don't have a mikveh here and there aren't very many clean bodies of water.
I think that's why the reason I asked your experience with the original one is I did kind of a makeshift one. All I remember is it was very cold. It was on a day that it was raining. It was like hailing and it was freezing, and we shouldn't have been in there, but we did it. So
Wow.
that's all I
And
remember.
that's a big experience
I
in
remember
itself,
being in there and being like,
too.
okay, okay, and then yeah.
Oh, the mikveh was very warm, very comfortable.
Well, thanks for rubbing it in.
That's one of the perks of doing it in inside,
Right.
is that weather is not an issue.
Yeah, because not only did we have that, but we also had the strong winds going on, and it was like you had the temperature, the wind chill, plus the wind in your face, and it was just
That does raise a question. So, like, I have family in Sabine Parish. They have like a lake house. So that's something I can just go do by myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So one thing I've asked for people who are converting before, um, and actually with I think your group I asked too, would you rather go to the mikveh building in Dallas, or we have she's not a member of the congregation, but she's a friend of the congregation with a lake house on actually a really nice, clean, pretty part of Caddo Lake. I haven't seen alligators there yet, but she has also volunteered her house for anybody who wants to do
That's
mikveh.
nice.
Yeah.
oh cool.
See, I wasn't sure like if there needed to be supervision every time you did it, because I know like some places there's like a mikveh lady, and so I didn't know that you could just like go out to Toledo Bend and.
So if you want to make sure if you want a halachic authority to tell you that you immersed in a way that was halachic, then you go to a mikveh lady, or you go to a mikveh with a mikveh lady, or with an attendant. So like I was the witness for the women, Rabbi Feivel was the witness for the men. But if it's for your own peace of mind once a month, or if it's for an emotional experience, then it's okay to just go by yourself. And it might even, and if you want someone there with you, it can be helpful to have somebody standing by the side, with the towel.
Yeah.
This is one thing that I was been curious about. I have yet to ask Jason about, just because he had a really bad week.
Yeah.
So, since you are here, I was very curious. But
For sure.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that everyone probably had a different kind of experience too.
like Jason, he definitely said everybody I've talked to said that there were a lot of emotions involved. So they were feeling different things. During service the other day, when everyone was being called up, um, everybody had this like mixed feeling that I've talked to, where they were very happy, excited to do it, but then I call it the Bima effect. When you get up there, like Justin, right, was his name? He was giving the speech. He's like, I promise, I had this whole speech, and then I just got up here and was like, yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. I told him it was the Bima effect. Like, I get up there and I had a book in front of me, and I'm like, I can't English.
Yeah, no, I also
Thanks
started
for stepping in.
we both started because I don't know, I forgot how to speak and read English for some reason. I don't know why.
So we just tag teamed it. So, but yeah, and then you had Caleb going and the whole family thing. So there was a whole different set of emotions there compared to everyone. So that was very fun to watch and experience.
Right, because we had a whole family, or for the people online, we had a whole family, a man and woman, their 2 kids, and there's one more on the way. And so there was a lot of, they've become the kids have kind of become our, what's the word, the mascots a little bit of our congregation. And so
there's the people mascots, and then
they're the pet mascots and the people mascots.
Yes.
But I think Kayla's probably Kayla, the 5-year-old, is a good, our pep.
She's very confident, gets on there, nothing phases her. I love it. I wish I had that energy, but
yeah.
you know.
So that was something pretty incredible.
one more note about the mikvah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it was, but when I got out, my hair was noticeably shinier and there was no frizz, and my
Huh.
skin was noticeably glowing.
Wow.
So.
Well, that's cool. It's basically a hot tub without chlorine.
That's why.
Yeah,
Chlorine sucks the soul out of you.
I washed my hair yesterday and I was sad because that was the best hair I've had ever.
Wow. That's good to know. Maybe I'll go specifically to that mikvah in the future whenever I'm in Dallas. Fantastic. This makes me so happy. Just like talking about all of this. And it's the Bima effect is definitely something real. And I just think like what a blessing that on the one hand it's a little bit scary to be on the Bima because you're in this particularly holy place. It's not that the place itself is holy, but you do holy stuff up there.
Right.
So it's got an air around it. But what a blessing that we get to be there surrounded by community.
And to participate.
Yeah.
I am still remembering services where you are sitting in there and you're told to be quiet and you don't really partake in it. So it's an adjustment, but it's also lovely to be able to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's why I didn't feel too horrible about like my mess ups because I was like,
Oh, honey, I messed up
yeah.
Because you've been to enough services to know that you're not the only one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's shift to something entirely different. We are going to learn about the rabbis. Is anyone here? I know, Candace, you're a history buff, but a different type of history. Is anyone else here into history?
I like it, but I don't always remember it.
That's good to know because I'm not a history buff. So what I'm going to do here is in our book, we have, and in the new book, you'll have to tell me what page number this is. Oh, good. Anna says kind of, question mark.
This is like one of the very first lessons.
Right. This is going to be in the 9th chapter.
128.
128. So in chapter 9, we're going to learn a little bit about the Talmud. We quote a lot of Talmud. We talk about the rabbinic text. But today we're actually going to learn what the Talmud is and why we care. But first, we're definitely going to need some historical context. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a history I have, a pretty short history that I have. I think looking at the timeline is really helpful here. And so stop me as I'm reading if there's something that you see on the timeline or something that I said that sparks something interesting. Oh, yes, Anna. Anna made hamantashen for the first time this Purim, and it was really fun, and they turned out great. Yay. I like Mara's question. What flavor?
Yes. What flavor?
Oh, I love apricot's my favorite.
Yes.
Apricot's my favorite.
Somebody made that chocolate caramel drizzle one.
Chocolate caramel drizzle?
It was,
yeah.
And for one of the things, and like you looked at it, you grabbed one, and you walked away, and they disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of sad.
It was a little heavy for me. I should have given you the rest of mine.
Okay.
So apricot hamantashen. Did anyone else bake hamantashen?
No, not this year.
You know, my thing is that hamantashen is like, it's exciting to look at, but they're not always awesome.
They can be so dry.
Yeah. Yes. You have to have the right recipe. Rebecca Austin has the best hamantashen recipe.
Have you told her that? Is she aware?
Yes, she's aware. She's aware. All right. We're going way back in time. When we were talking about Tanakh, where Tanakh, or I shouldn't say where Tanakh ends, but where the books of the prophets and Kings all end is right around this Babylonian exile. So the first temple has been destroyed. We don't know what happened to most of the tribes, but Benjamin, Judah, a little bit of Manasseh, they are exiled into various places in Bavel, The Persians under Cyrus II conquer Babylon in 538 BCE, and they permit the Jews to return to the land of Israel and to rebuild the temple. Now, this is when the Persians conquer Babylon, this is where the Purim story takes place. So it's kind of in that time when people are starting to return to Jerusalem, but not quite yet. The second temple then is dedicated in 515 BCE, and the books of Ezra and Nehemiah talk about that quite a bit. Alexander the Great conquers the get a hold of it. He dies 10 years later, and the Hellenistic world is split between two power bases, one in Egypt and one in Syria. So we've got the Seleucid Greeks and we've got the Ptolemies. Greek rule is mostly benign until Antiochus IV of the Seleucid or the Syrian Greek dynasty forbids the practice of Judaism, leading to the Maccabean uprising in 166 to 160 BCE. And this is the story commemorated in the holiday of Hanukkah. Nice. All right. The Maccabees win independence for the first time since 586 BCE, but while they're good warriors, they're terrible politicians. So after several generations of corrupt leadership and internal strife, the Romans are invited in to keep the peace in 63 BCE. This is the end of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel for the next 2,000 years. In 66 of the Common Era, the Jews revolt against the Romans, and within 4 years, the temple, the second temple, is destroyed. So 70 CE is a big moment in Jewish history. That 70 CE is when our second temple, our last temple so far, is destroyed. The final chapter of the rebellion, known as the Great Revolt, was the fall of the mountain fortress of Masada in 73 of the Common Era. So if you ever go to Israel, Masada is a big place to visit because it's this giant fortress that the Zealots occupied. Used to be a Greek fortress, became a Jewish fortress. Zealots occupied it, and once the Romans started coming up the mountain, they all killed themselves. That was kind of the ending moment of the Jews trying to get hold of their land. Revolts break out again in 132 CE under the leadership of Bar Kokhba, who's kind of a messianic figure, and even more Jews are killed. Jerusalem is converted into a pagan city in which Jews are forbidden to live. You had a question, Mark? Oh, you were just
making some notes.
Yeah. So at this point in time, we have no temple. Now, knowing a little bit of Torah, what problem is that gonna bring to? Oh yes, Anna says they make you hike it at 5 a.m. on birthright. They do. If you go to any tour trip to Israel and it's during the summer, you're going to have to hike birthright at 5 a.m. or you're going to have to hike Masada at 5 a.m. So I would recommend going at a time that's not summer, so that you don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. because Masada's pretty cool when you're not asleep.
Yeah, I did birthright in August, and it was definitely a 5 a.m. hike.
Yeah, right? How much do you actually remember of Masada?
I remember more of Masada than I do of most of Birthright, just because I've never hiked a mountain at 5 a.m. before. So it was like, new experience.
Maybe that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
All right. So what's the difficulty knowing what we know about Torah and Tanakh? What's the difficulty with not having a temple?
Well, they can't do a lot of the mitzvot because it specifically requires the temple, and sacrifice specifically requires the temple.
Yeah, they can't do a lot of the mitzvot. They can't do a whole lot of the mitzvot because we need sacrifices, and there's a specific way that the priests have to dress and the things that the priests have to do. So no temple, no sacrifices, no priests. What do we do? And that's when the rabbis kick into gear. Before I go into who the rabbis were and why this is important, just important, just good to go over. I just want to check to see if this is on here. It's not. Good to go over 4 different groups who are significant in our story. So let's see. Okay, so group number 1 is going to be the Pharisees. The Pharisees are our rabbis. They are our spiritual descendants. They emphasize home and synagogue-based ritual over temple service. They are the ancestors of us, the ancestors of our rabbis. So can you think of any rituals that we do Jewishly that you know aren't in Torah? Any mitzvot that we do currently that we know aren't in Torah?
Hanukkah's not a mitzvah, but the whole thing with the lights is not technically in Torah or written anywhere, but it's sort of not a mitzvah, but it's acted as if it's a mitzvah.
Yes, yeah. So the blessings we say over the Hanukkah candles are the blessing. One of the blessings that we say is, "Blessed are you, God, who sanctified us with your commandments, commanding us to light the Hanukkah candles." There is no commandment to light the Hanukkah candles anywhere in Tanakh. In fact, Maccabees and the story of Hanukkah is nowhere in Tanakh. So the rabbis, the Pharisees, kind of have this idea that they want to make sure that there are enough home rituals, enough stuff that we can do at home to connect us to our Judaism and our history. And so they brand that candle lighting as a mitzvah.
Is that similar to the question I asked you during daily prayer service when I asked about, the Shema, like when we yell it and, when we actually say it out loud, but some people mute it or don't say the second part at all?
That's a little bit different, but
Okay.
what I will say is that no one commands anyone to say the Shema, to say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and then the next few verses, and then one paragraph from Numbers and one other paragraph from, I think, Exodus, Deuteronomy. It must be Deuteronomy. But 2 other specific paragraphs. Those were the choice of the rabbis of the Talmud.
Okay.
Because now that we can't go to the temple, we have to put together a prayer service to replace temple worship.
I think the first part you were like, yeah, one of them is actually in the Talmud and the other one is not, which is.
So that's a side question, but in the Shema, there's the first line is the Shema, the second line is Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, which is not in Torah.
Okay.
That's from elsewhere. You had a question, Candace?
I didn't have a question. I just never thought about the Hanukkah blessing thing.
Yeah.
That's like not in there.
Okay, so there's another one that's really similar. What's another blessing? What's another ritual we do that we think of as a mitzvah but isn't talked about in Torah? It's very similar to the Hanukkah candles.
So lighting
Lighting Shabbat candles. There is nowhere in Torah that tells us to light Shabbat candles. And yet,
wild to me.
the rabbis say this is what God commanded us to do, right? We say that it's a mitzvah to pray this certain prayer practice 3 times a day. That's a replacement of our temple service. And so the rabbis instituted that particular prayer service 3 times a day. It looks different now than it did 2,000 years ago, but it's the main framework that they put together. So a lot of the practices that we do, the particular rules to building a sukkah, the particular ways that we kosher our kitchens, all of that was put forward by the rabbis. And the main goal is for now that we're not in a world with a temple, how can we best connect to one another, especially knowing that we can't live in Jerusalem anymore? We make our worship and our lifestyle centered on localized communities and on family on family practices, things we can do in the home, things we can do ourselves, which is pretty great, I think, because before that, our worship and our rituals and our mitzvot, a lot of them were centered around this hierarchical structure of the priests. Um, and this was, even if the temple had not been destroyed, this was kind of a long time coming. So we have the Pharisees on one end who are doing a whole lot of studying and a whole lot of reshaping of what Jewish ritual means, but they were really around even before the destruction of the temple, because they're not nemesis, but they're the Jews who are around kind of right next to them were the Sadducees. The Sadducees is the wealthy aristocratic class, and they really, really like temple leadership. So at that point in time, as we know from Isaiah and from other books of, as we know from Isaiah, as we know from other books of prophets, as we know, I don't know much New Testament, but as I hear, as we know from the New Testament, like the priests were pretty corrupt by the end of the Second Temple period, and so the Pharisees, the rabbinic group, is really reacting to a similar sort of thing that other break-off groups are reacting to at
Church
the
of
time,
England.
right?
Well, not at the time, but
Right, but like,
generally.
but you know, early Christianity is kind of reacting to the same, or early Jewish Christians are reacting to kind of the same sort of thing of this priestly thing, this hierarchical priestly class thing, is not really working out. They're pretty corrupt. They're, you know, bringing these sacrifices and they're eating all of this meat while there are people starving over there, right? So the Pharisees, our rabbinic ancestors, are kind of reacting to that same thing, to the Sadducees being this hierarchical class. So at this turn of the Common Era, there are a whole lot of different groups that are reacting to the Sadducees, right? That are reacting to this priestly class. So we have the Pharisees, our ancestors. We have the Essenes, who are, oh, this is a good description, a group of ascetic and disciplined group of ancient hippies. So they rejected the temple in Jerusalem as corrupt and retired to the desert. This is the group that likely produced the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they lived in caves, and they were ascetic, and really, really liked purity. They didn't think that the Sadducees were hierarchical and pure enough, and so they went and lived on their own. What is the problem? So the Essenes aren't around anymore. Why do you think the Essenes aren't around anymore?
Maybe because they were hermits and didn't.
Celibate.
Yeah, they were ascetic, right? A celibate group is not going to last for very long.
There's only so much you can do.
There's only so much you can do, right? So the Essenes aren't around anymore, weren't around for very long. The Zealots at the same time were this revolutionary group that are dedicated to preparing for and provoking war with Rome, and also with those Jews who they felt were collaborators. They were not as powerful as Rome, and so they were no longer.
Is that where the word comes from? When you call someone a zealot?
I don't think that's where the word comes from, but it's a word used for a lot of different religious extremists. So they were not only anti-Rome, they were anti-Jews who didn't follow the mitzvot the way they thought they should. And then at the same time, you've also got the Nazarenes, who end up, who end up being Christianity eventually. They're the descendants of Christianity. So Zealots aren't around anymore because they're not going to beat Rome. That's at the time. And Essenes aren't around because they're ascetic.
They name a lot of churches after.
Yes.
So that's why Nazareth. See, I never considered where else someone could be of. You know, when it's like Joseph of Nazareth. I never thought about of somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. And in the Talmud, they talk about them as Notzri. So, like at some point, some of them were Jews, or many of them were Jews, and then that changed. That changed after time. All right. So, question about this whole timeline. I guess there's more. So after 70, because there are a lot more lot more time after 70. So after 70, the Pharisees begin to refer to themselves as rabbis or as teachers, and they take it upon themselves to update and expand the laws of Torah for a new changed world without the temple. So they both expand the law, right? So kashrut is, all the rules of kashrut come from the rabbis, right? From the Torah, all we know are the animals to eat and not to eat. But from the rabbis, we have, what does it mean to kill an animal in a way that's kosher? Or what does it mean not to eat milk and meat together? Oh, that should include chicken, right? So that's where all of that comes from, is the rabbis. But at the same time, we're going to see a little bit later, if we have time today, we're going to see that they also limit ancient practices. So the rabbis are anti-capital punishment, they're anti-animal sacrifice, and so in a lot of ways, our rabbis actually limit the mitzvot. So, for example, they're going to find a whole bunch of ways to, anytime the Torah says stone somebody to death, they're going to find a whole bunch of ways to make the Torah say something other than stone them to death. And we'll see an example of that. The Talmud, the product of their ongoing discussions over 500 years, creates modern Judaism as we know it today. The Talmud is a bipartite text made up of an earlier shorter document and its longer commentary. So the first layer is the Mishnah. Mishnah is compiled in 200 CE by Rabbi Judah HaNasi, and that starts really in about 0. That's when we start being a little bit anti the priestly class, so even before the temple is destroyed. So 0 to 200-ish is when this initial law code is compiled. And then between 200 and 500-ish, the rabbis add on layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of discussion upon that Mishnah, and that becomes the Talmud.
So 200 CE to 500?
200 to 500-ish of the Common Era.
And that becomes the Talmud? Oh, here it
And that
is.
becomes the Talmud. So this page I find really helpful. In Judaism, when we talk about Torah, as we've said before, we're not just talking about the 5 books of Moses. We're talking about both written Torah. When we talk about written Torah, we're talking about the Torah, right? Those 5 books of Moses. When we're talking about oral Torah, we're talking about all of the text that was added to expand upon that. And we're really specifically talking about rabbinic text. So written Torah is Torah and Tanakh. Oral Torah is rabbinic text and anything that came after that, right? So your Sex and the City episode with Charlotte, that's oral Torah. That's something that's commenting on, or that's teaching us something about Torah. So Mishnah, again.
So would that also include when we watched the snippet from Prince of Egypt, how they are doing the story too? Okay.
Exactly, right? Prince of Egypt. But if we're talking traditionally what oral Torah is, it's Mishnah and Gemara. So Mishnah, again, is that 0 to 200 of the Common Era. It's a lot shorter, still long, but it's a lot shorter than Gemara. Gemara is all of the commentary on that Mishnah, which is very, very long. Let's see. So Mishnah plus Gemara equals Talmud. There are 2 aspects, at least 2 aspects that we'll see in Talmud. One is halakha, that's where we'll see law. So halakha is Jewish law, and the Talmud does introduce Jewish law. It's not always definitive. In fact, in the Talmud, most of the time it's not definitive. It's a lot of different people arguing about what the law should be, and we generally go by what the last word was, but not always. Agadah is the storytelling. So there are going to be a lot of stories in Talmud and a lot of commentary on Torah text. A lot of discussions with one another about the meaning of life. So Agadah is all the tangents, like all the stories, all the tangents, and some of them are gorgeous. So Halakha is the Jewish law, Agadah is the stories and everything else. We learn a lot of time values on that. So, but there's been a lot of time that has happened between 500 and today. So, our modern, let me change the view on this. Our modern Talmud text is going to look like you see on the screen or like you see in the book. This is the first page of Talmud. And again, there aren't vowels on here, although there are versions of the Talmud that have vowels, right? So it's not a rule that the Talmud has to not have vowels in it. The Talmud is written not just in Hebrew, but also in Aramaic, which was the vernacular of the time period. So it'll go back and forth between Hebrew and vernacular. If somebody's speaking in Hebrew, it's either because they are an earlier rabbi, so like one of the rabbis, they're referencing a rabbi from the 0 to 200 period, or it's a rabbi who's living in the land of Israel, 200 to 500-ish. So it depends. But if they're speaking in Aramaic, most likely they're living 200 to 500 in Babylon, in Babylonia. It's the format of this page, just so you know what is on a page of Talmud. This is just kind of saying, look, this is the first page of the chapter, or the first word of the chapter. Each chapter begins with, each chapter and every few pages, you get a Mishnah. So you get a little chunk of Mishnah. The Mishnah is going to be this section here, where, and it ends with this little Gimel Mem, this little bold text here. That the Gimel Mem stands for Gemara. So the Mishnah is all of this, and then the Gemara goes on for a lot of pages after this, the commentary on that Mishnah. So it's all of the commentary on this Mishnah that was here. This is the stuff saying how we should be saying the Shema in the morning. That's what this Mishnah is about. The page title is, and the chapter title is here. This says Chapter 1, Perek Rishon, and Barachot is the tractate, or like the volume that it's a part of. So this is, Brachot means blessings. So this is a whole tractate about blessings. This is the page number here. We have a whole bunch of commentary on here. So the commentary that you'll see on most pages of Gemara is on the right. You'll see, or sorry, in the middle of the margin. If you're flipping a book open, wherever the middle is, whether it's on the right or the left, you're going to see Rashi, who we'll learn about at some point in time, about 1100 of the Common Era, and he's seen as like the heart of commentary. So he's always in the middle.
Yes, we do quote him well.
We do quote Rashi a lot.
Rashi is quoted a lot, especially in 929.
Yeah, Rashi is quoted a lot, and there are a lot of Jews who consider Rashi as just as sacred, like his interpretation is the interpretation we should be following, and his interpretation is just as sacred as any other rabbinic text or any other interpretation of Torah. So when you buy a Haredi or an ultra-Orthodox Tanakh, the translation will look a little bit different because they're incorporating Rashi's translation into their own translation, because that is accepted as Word of God. So Rashi is always in the middle, and his script is kind of funky. It's a whole different lettering system just to make it look fancy and just so that it looks different than the normal Hebrew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
so
why I looked.
so if you look at it and you're like, I cannot read those letters, that's because it's a
not
totally different font.
Okay.
It's all Hebrew, it's just a totally different font. In the outside here, the opposite of where Rashi is, you're going to have the commentary of his grandchildren, the Tosafot, and his grandchildren, and I guess beyond grandchildren, because they're 12 to 400, or 1200 to 1400 of the Common Era, and they write a lot of commentary as well. So Rashi in the middle, Tosafot on the outside, and then depending on what version of Gemara you're using, like here, there's this is quoting some halachic texts. So this is saying, okay, in Rambam, who's another medieval commentator, you're going to find more about this on this page. In the Shulchan Aruch, which is another code of law, medieval code of law, you're going to find this on this page. So that's what this section is here. And here is just another rabbi they're quoting, Rav Nisim Gaon. I don't know who that is, but he's important enough to be in this book. So each book is going to do it differently. And if you look really, really, really closely, Talmud quotes Torah a lot. So if you look at this little circle here, that means that this is quoting Torah. So this part here, again, we're talking about the Shema. It's saying, B'shoch becha uvkumecha, B'shoch becha uvkumecha. Any idea where that's from? Ve'ahavta. It's from the Ve'ahavta. So we're talking about the Shema and Ve'ahavta here, right? So what the Mishnah was saying, is that you got to say it in the morning and evening, and the commentary is saying, well, that's because we say b'shach becha uvkumecha when you lie down and when you rise up. So therefore, we have to say it in the morning and evening. And so that quotes the chapter that's from is on the side here. Similarly here, Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker, Yom Echad is on the, it was evening and it was morning the first day. Where is that from? Evening and morning on the first day.
Brain fart.
The first day ever.
Yeah, I was gonna say from
Creation.
Yeah, creation. So
Bereshit, or-
yeah,
okay.
Genesis chapter 1, and so you see that quotation on the side here. Okay. Not all Gemara is this complicated. So if you want to feel really special, you can totally learn from a page of Gemara that looks like this. But there are easier ways. There's a beautiful, I'll get it after this. I'm sad that I didn't bring it in the room. There's a beautiful edition of Gemara that's got both the Hebrew with vowels and the English in 2 different sections with lots of commentary.
Do we cover when you zoom in the middle section?
Mm-hmm.
That middle column, is it going top to bottom? How's that written?
It is going top to bottom.
And what is that right
Which one?
there? In the middle column, like
You mean
on the left side of that
The
column.
words that are parallel to
Yeah.
the other ones, they're
Oh.
perpendicular, sorry, they're not going the same
What
way.
is that? Ve'iyun Tosafot Zvachim something something.
Yeah, I can see it when you zoom, but I can't.
It's
see
hard
it on
with
the
the
page.
it's hard with the harchik. It's hard with this here. But it's referring to something in Tosafot. So I'm wondering if it's just saying that this stuff over here is Tosafot.
Okay. So it's another marker or another source identifier.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And this Aleph, Bet, Gimel on the side here is just so that you can, when you're studying with your partner, you can say, okay, we left off on Gimel before and now we're on Daled.
Okay.
Great. Other questions about this scary looking page? Or intriguing looking page, I should say.
Yeah,
It's
it's a lot of
intriguing. It's a
information.
lot of information.
It is. So I will show you, I'll show you a better edition if you like paper books. If you're not a paper book person, I know I've shown this before, but might as well show it again. We go to Safaria. Can you all see? Yeah, I think everyone can see. If you want to figure out what is this whole Talmud Mishnah stuff, okay, I'm currently learning 2 Mishnayot a day, and so it's in order here. It'll tell you there are 6 different categories of Mishnah. So agriculture, holidays, family law, which is a nice way of saying Nashim means women. Nezikin is damages, so this is like civil law basically. sacrifices and purity laws. And so if you're interested in seeing what the Talmud has to say about, let's say, Shabbat, for example, Mishnah is a great way to start. And this, the version they have at Sefaria is pretty easy to follow. The bold is the original text, or is the original translation of the original text, and then the not bold is the author's way of explaining what is happening in between the lines. And you can click on it if you want to know where the parallel text is in the Talmud. You can click on the side, and it'll show you where it's talked about in Talmud. And if you want to know, if you want to go to the Talmud page, for example, you can figure out what, if you want to know what Rashi says about something, for example. Let's say we go to the first page. This is what we were just seeing on that big page. You can click this section, commentary, Rashi, and then unfortunately Rashi is not in English here. So that's about, oh, is that because it's just Hebrew? No. Unfortunately, Rashi isn't in English here. I apologize. I thought he would be. But you get this person's, you get Steinsaltz's.
But you can grab it from there, get a rough
Yeah,
translation.
exactly. Exactly, and probably more interpretations too.
Oh, okay, this is the one that you guys are talking about. One of the resources in 929 that you mentioned, you grabbed some.
This is Sefaria,
Okay.
Sefaria.org. Yeah. So really easy to, it's a good way to, if you feel like you want to start learning Mishnah or Talmud, Sefaria is a great place to look at. Also, you can just Google, there's a program where you learn a little bit of Talmud every day, and which is called Daf Yomi. And so you can look at, if you're interested in Daf Yomi, you've got this, you've got a whole bunch of websites that are gonna have people explain the Daf, explain the page of Talmud to you. If you want to find, for example, a feminist Daf Yomi, because the rest of the Daf Yomi things aren't going to be, you know, there are a whole bunch of different links here too.
I think Safari is the one that you can like look for like certain like central ideas, right? Like, and I feel like I went on there one time and looked at feminism specifically for like Tanakh.
Right. So if you want to find out it on Sefaria, if you want to find out about a topic, you can just put feminism on there, and it'll, for a lot of topics, it'll tell you, like, whoever the editor is of all of this will bring up their favorite texts that have to do with feminism or with vegetarianism or whatever you'd like to put in the search bar too. But they also have a section on Daf Yomi. So like right now we're in this page for Daf Yomi, and it'll bring you there. Right. So that's how to learn Talmud. But we haven't actually had an example of what this whole Talmud thing is in general. If anyone needs me, they can call me on my cell phone.
Yeah, you made it before. You're like, I don't particularly like answering if it's not office hours.
Yes. All right. Questions thus far. I threw a lot of things at you.
It's interesting to see because that's something I don't remember covering.
And it's such an important part to cover because we're rabbinic Jews. We're not. There are some Jews called Karaites who they keep to the Torah and that's it, right? They don't follow the rabbinic texts. But we are rabbinic Jews. The worship that we do and the rituals that we do are really seated in this rabbinic movement. Even though we do consider Torah to be a whole lot more sacred than those rabbinic texts, right? We don't think, there are some people who will say that the rabbis, or that God handed down the Talmud from Sinai, right? But not everyone does.
How did they decide who wrote in the Talmud and like whose contribution? Because I'm feeling like it was, not necessarily one continuous document.
It is not one. Okay. We're gonna go back to.
Yeah, because I'm sure it was like a whole bunch of
Actually,
people
this
like,
one.
I'll comment.
I think you will get it a little bit when we read this excerpt.
Okay.
Basically, it reads like a whole bunch of old men arguing because it is.
Oh, okay.
So that's the format of the Talmud, is a bunch of old men arguing, and they go on lots of tangents.
Or as Rebecca calls it, rabbit holes.
Or rabbit holes. Yes, they will.
Rabbi holes.
Rabbi holes. There we
Rabbit
go.
holes.
Yes. A caveat when we're learning this, and if we get to the other text today, the texts in this book are very anti-authoritarian in nature, or can be read as anti-authoritarian in nature. Not all of the Talmud is anti-authoritarian. So just throwing it out there, these are examples in which the rabbis kind of reinterpret the Torah completely to something different. Not all of the Talmud is like that, but these are kind of some of the fun sections to read. All right. So what I would like to do, trying to think if the best thing would be to read this together, or let's see. All right. So what I'd like for us to do actually is to go into groups. I don't know, Anna and Eddie and Mara, if y'all are, you know what, that might be difficult. I think let's read this on our own. Let's read this on our own. We're going to read the part that says Mishnah and Gemara on our own. But before we do that, sorry, I'm out of order. We're going to read this excerpt from Torah first, and we're going to ask lots of questions on it. Okay? So this excerpt from Torah, this is Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 18 through 21. And my first question is going to be, how does it make you feel knowing that this is included in Torah? All right. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son, a ben sorer umoreh, who does not obey his father and mother and will not listen to them when they discipline him, his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of the town. They shall say to the elders, "This son of ours is wayward and defiant. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." Then all of the men in his town shall stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear and be afraid. How does that make you feel that this text is in our Torah, handed down by God at Sinai?
Initially, you feel that gut reaction because it seems very alien. Although I kind of started checking out the study Bible section, and like it just because I just made this assumption when I started reading Genesis about the creation, and I pointed out, by the way, creation, there wasn't nothing. Like what we think is from nothing, it doesn't, like our perception is a vacuum of space, but they didn't even have the concept of a vacuum. So there was, and I'd never even thought to consider that. So I kind of like, my initial thing is like, oof, this looks awful, like terrible and all but then I'm kind of thinking, I'm probably thinking about it from the perspective like of the Puritans and all of that, and like your brain goes oof, but then I'm, historically I'm like, what they may be saying may not seem to be what it's saying.
So you're jumping to apologetics.
Well, it's more that I kind of, some words may literally not mean the same thing to me. Like maybe when they say stubborn and rebellious, it might be, oh, he's a murderer. Like for all I know, that could be, because in England, gay did not used to mean homosexual. So people woke up Bonnie and gay. And the point is, like, that can be literally like a word can randomly mean something different. So I don't know if I apologize, but I wouldn't necessarily know I understood exactly what it was meaning.
You're thinking like one of the rabbis.
No,
the
not
context is important, because if I were to reading this in today's mind with my modern mind, I would go, this is absurd, this is ridiculous. I mean, a child is going to be a child. They're going to defy you at some points. Like stoning them to death seems to be a bit extreme.
We would have no teenagers in this
Exactly.
world.
We would have nobody left because
We would go the way of the Essenes if we stoned every rebellious teenager.
yes, but I guess looking at it from that perspective, uh, did they really mean stoned to death, or was that just their way of instilling fear so everyone fell in line?
Especially because it says all Israel will hear and be afraid.
Yes.
Right? Maybe we just tell everybody that we're going to stone them to death.
You know,
Interesting.
like a empty threat.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah, my thought was definitely like, and I apologize. I apologize if I'm repeating what other people said because it's kind of hard to hear from the Zoom room, but it kind of hinges on whether it's literal or allegorical. So when we talk about a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother and will not listen to them when they discipline him, are we specifically talking about literally rebellious children, like children who are finding their way in the world, children who sometimes get in trouble with their parents? Are we literally saying they should die? Or are we saying that basically like we have responsibilities to our community in general as like represented by the father and mother? And do we need people to respect and obey the societal rules that we have, rather than specifically like if your father tells you to go to bed and you don't want to go to bed, you get stoned to death?
Oh yeah, somebody think like because when we say like curse words in modern terms, it wasn't specific words. There was no such thing as a curse word back 500 years ago. It was a curse word was any word you were using to say you are the son of a lemming. You know that was a curse word. So the same like we can you can't say that. It's like people could just have very different perspectives on what the meaning even is, and it's also a translation. So there can be some inaccuracy, and we might have lost. You know, the meaning might have shifted depending on who wrote this.
Y'all are very
Yeah.
generous.
I mean, yeah, they could also just have been really mean people, but
No, I love it. You are thinking like the rabbis, because when the rabbis are writing the Talmud, they are never going to say that the Torah is wrong, right? That goes the Torah is sacred, handed down by God at Sinai, and so they're going to find some way to interpret this that that makes God stay both someone who is both a figure of awe, but also a figure of compassion. So what I'd like for us to do now is take a moment. We'll do this on our own. We're going to read through. The part that says Mishnah. We're going to stop before Gemara, but we'll read through the part that says Mishnah, and we'll ask the question: what techniques do the rabbis use in discussing our biblical text? Right? So, what techniques are you seeing when they're discussing the biblical text? If you have questions, feel free to ask. But we'll take a few minutes to just read this part on our own.
Yeah, I can hear people arguing with each other. That's so.
It's like the voices in my head.
Yeah, that's the feel.
That is exactly how the Mishnah talks and the Gemara talks, and sometimes they even insult each other. So they'll call each other. They'll say like, "You're a yellow goose" or something that like we can't understand now, but it's obviously an insult.
Yeah.
So that's the format. And Mishnah doesn't normally sound this disjointed, but Gemara does. This is a rare instance in Mishnah. So what are some of the techniques that we're seeing here?
Coming up with a lot of like, well, if actually, if this and this is happening, then they're good, they're off the hook. Like just coming up with a lot of stuff to like save the situation.
Yeah, they're walking
Like
it
the Will
backwards.
Smith punching
Yep,
thing.
they're walking back.
Technically.
They're walking back. They're readjusting they're reassessing the situation, kind of like Emma was saying. Well, this really means glutton and drunkard really means that he has to eat a very specific amount of meat and wine, but not on a holiday because everybody eats and drinks a lot on holidays.
It sounds like middle schoolers like trying to like get out of trouble. I don't know, like that's how it is to me.
Well, I mean that's exactly what I think of because you're saying in the first piece stubborn and rebellious, but then they go, oh, if you don't have hair from your chin to full beard, you're disqualified.
They are not talking about hair from your chin and your when two hairs appear on his beard until the time it fills in. This is speaking about the lower beard. What are we talking about when we're saying the lower beard? Lower than your face.
Saying
Got it.
lower
Oh,
beard
boy.
is worse than just saying pubes. Like,
But also, which,
Right,
which
yes.
side? Front or back?
I am sure that there is a Gemara that talks about whether we're talking about front or back.
It's just there's a lot of sidestepping here. It's like, oh, we mean
Yes.
to do this, but no, if we did this, everyone would be like we'd be basically screwed. So we gotta
It looks like it takes a very general statement and makes it like very, very, very specific. Like it argues itself into like this spiral where what it seems like a very general statement of like, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother, it's like, oh, well, it doesn't count if this, it doesn't count if that, and finding like justifications for narrowing this ostensibly extremely broad category of stubborn and rebellious sons to something very different.
Right. And I love that it says too that well, I think we'll get the parents who are fitting for each other in the Gemara, but part of the thing about the father and mother is his father and mother shall take hold of him. So the rabbis are thinking, okay, father and mother shall take hold of him, so it can't just be his father and it can't just be his mother. So father and mother must be
both
together.
have to agree.
Both of them must agree, right? They shall take hold of him. So they have to be physically able to take hold of him, right? They can't have a disability, physical disability, right? They have to say to the elders, right? They have to say to the elders. So they have to be in a position where they can speak, right? And they have to say, this son of ours is wayward and defiant. And in Talmudic eyes, this always means that you're pointing to something visually. So they have to be able to see, right? So they're taking all of these little techniques that they use elsewhere in the text, and you're right, they make it very narrow. They narrow something that's very broad. And we'll see this in lots of different places where the punishment is really strict in Torah. The rabbis, for any case of capital punishment, and there are not many cases of capital punishment, it has to be first brought before a court of 3, and then a court of 23, and then a court of 72, and then again before the court of 72 before it can be declared capital punishment, before capital punishment can be given.
So it's like they impose very harsh, strict penalties, but they realize do they realize that they're so strict that they have to find ways to back it out, or like say no, you really have to be bad to have this, to be held against
Right.
this.
Yeah.
Well, especially if it has to be unanimous. I mean, getting 72 people
to agree.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I think it's a majority, so I don't think it has to be unanimous. But if it's if one person is unsure, then it's
Okay.
got to be a majority. Which is very different than when you read Torah, right? In Torah, people get stoned for stuff or struck down for stuff all the time, right? But the rabbis are taking this and putting it in a different context. So let's read the Gemara a little bit. So Mishnah is taking Torah text and both Torah text and the practice that was happening during the time and puts it kind of into law. Gemara is expanding on the Mishnah. So he's saying, so the Mishnah is saying if the mother is not fitting for the father, then he's not liable. So the Gemara asks a question to the Mishnah. What does it mean that his mother is not fitting for his father? And you're right, Jade, this sounds like a bunch of people arguing with each other. Right? It's asking questions about the questions that are being asked. It might mean that their relationship is in some way improper. However, at the end of the day, his parents are still his parents, so this probably isn't so. So a lot of times what Gemara will do is it'll say, this is one possibility, but it's wrong.
It's almost like they're saying, I know you are, but what am I?
A little bit, right? I know you are, but what am I?
What it feels like.
But it's
when
more
you're
like
thinking.
in a debate, when
Yeah.
when you'll say, I know you think that X, Y, and Z.
Straw manning and steel
Yeah,
manning.
straw
Yeah,
man.
that's-
Yeah.
Exactly. But rather, it must mean that his mother must be physically similar to her husband. Why? Because the Torah says he does not pay attention to our voice. Singular, not plural. From this, we learn that they must have similar voices, and it logically follows that they must have the same physical stature. So they're adding something else here. Not only does the son have all of these things that he needs to qualify, not only do the parents have all these things, but there's one more, that they have to look and sound exactly the same. There is a teaching, the Gemara says, there never was and never will be a true ben sorer umoreh, a true stubborn and rebellious son. Right? All of these qualifications make it impossible. Right? Why then is it written at all? And the Gemara says, it must be simply so that you can study it, and in so doing, gain a reward. Right? It's a learning moment, teaching moment. Whose opinion does this follow? It might be Rabbi Yehuda, who requires that the parents look and speak similarly, which is basically impossible. It also might be Rabbi Shimon, right, who taught this. This is what you were saying, Mark. Just because a boy ate meat and drank wine, his parents will never take him out to be stoned, right? Just because a kid stays out too late, stays out later than curfew, his parents aren't going to, take him in the back and stone him, right?
I mean, we've seen kids today's world do far worse, and the parents still back them.
Right. But Rabbi Yonatan said, I once saw a stubborn and rebellious son, and I even sat on his grave. That's the end of the story. Okay, what did that add to the whole situation? What did that do? What did that last conversation add to the whole situation?
Clearly, somebody couldn't be loopholed out of this. They were just bad.
Yeah. So there are two opinions here.
I saw at the end of the day, the kid still got in trouble. The kid was still punished and put to death. We can. It's kind of saying you guys can argue this up and down, left and right, but at the end of the day, this still is what happened. That's what I got out of it. I still like that. The Mishnah. I feel other. Well, maybe they do, and I just don't know the text. But I feel like other religions don't open up to having this kind of discussion about their text and it being a collection.
Maybe
Exactly.
that's why it's a little challenge.
For sure.
Yeah, so it's they're arguing. It sounds ridiculous, but they're having the conversation, which is good.
Some of it,
So
some of it does sound like a bit like how the Catholics are with fish. Everything is a fish.
right.
I don't know anything about the. Oh, I
You're
see.
not allowed to eat anything but fish.
Oh, on the Fridays, yeah.
So whales are fish. That's where the whole thing came from. Like everything is a fish.
Yeah, you
pretty
have to
much.
have a discussion about like what does it mean. But I do like it's kind of at the end it brings it all together. Like this is still what happened. You know, it's
Mhm.
good we're having this conversation about it, but
Yeah, Rabbi
yeah.
Yonatan's kind of at the end of the day like, this is Torah, guys.
Yeah.
God commanded this.
That's definitely what I got. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the energy some of them have. It's like the energy of we're arguing about what is a fish. It's like we all know what is and isn't a fish. It's kind of like
Yeah,
that sort of
that's the
tone of
vibe.
yeah, we know they stoned the guy, but the point is more we want to argue, so we're just going to do it.
Mhm. Yeah. So on one side, this is being taught because God said so, and this is what we do.
Mhm.
On even though it doesn't happen very often, this is what we do. And on the other side, it's well, this was taught so that we can learn a bunch, which is a totally rabbinic thing to say, right? We just spent what 20 minutes learning a piece of text that we're never ever going to use, except to talk about how to learn text, right? This is the whole rabbinic endeavor. Is that we talk a lot about how Judaism is into discussion and interpretation and learning, and it literally comes from our sacred text. Right? That in itself is seen to be a mitzvah, even if it's just about a stubborn and rebellious son who doesn't exist. Right.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I think so. Oh man, maybe next time we'll do the this story is really fun. Um, I still want to learn this story. Let's learn this story. No, let's not, because that'll take lots of time. But we'll start out with that story. I want to go to Pirkei Avot though. Pirkei Avot is another bit of Mishnah, and Pirkei Avot is a tractate of Mishnah that is just it's just a whole bunch of advice. Right? It's a whole bunch of advice, and it's a whole bunch of those kinds of statements that you would see on posters in a classroom. And I would love for each of us to look at these quotes from Pirkei Avot, and to see, is there one of these that really stands out for me today? Because it'll be a different one each day. These are a little bit more applicable than the stubborn and rebellious son. And so we'll take a few minutes. Right. Are there any particular quotes here that you're holding today?
I quite like the Ben Zoma one.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously, one who conquers themselves. And I hope I wouldn't be in the profession I was if that was easy. Um, so, but also the one who learns from everyone. Because I kind of listened to a podcast about myths and useful stories that aren't true, don't make a lick of sense, but have been useful to people surviving. Like, plant all your crops on a full moon and the gods will favor you. And apparently that was because if the crops were synchronized, everyone planted on the same day, then the pest animals would like have all the crops ripen at the same time, so they couldn't eat them all.
Hmm.
So people who synchronized their crops by going, oh, the gods will favor you, plant on a full moon, they got more crop in those communities. So the whole they may not. It may seem silly, but there was a reason behind the story.
Hmm. Learning from everyone. So Ben Zoma, learning with everyone and trying to find space to conquer themselves. Um, and Mara says, I really like these quotes, but I don't understand the one about the 3 crowns. What is meant by a good name? I'm trying to think which one that is. The crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But the crown of a good name is the greatest of all. I think it's of having a reputation as a good person, right? Of people saying, oh, I know Mara. She's awesome, right? Of, those people that you think about and the first thing you think is, they're wonderful. I should call them, right? I think that's the good name they're talking about. Or Mark, what a sweetheart.
Said no one ever. I am a little interested in Hillel's. One where it says, a shy person cannot learn, a strict person cannot teach, and in a place where there is no humility, strive to be a human being.
Right, so the first Hillel statement.
I like the second part where it's saying, in a place where there's no humanity, strive to be the true human being. Like, especially in today's world where everybody's like ready to pin against one another, like find the common ground or help someone out, kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. But I'm a little in disagreement with the first part, saying a shy person cannot learn because everyone has a different way of learning. And while I'm not always like I'm gonna groan and grumble if somebody's like really strict with me, but I have learned some of my most important and like best lessons from, say, my strictest teachers.
Right.
I've gotten very mad at them in high school, but then I'm going back to, I find myself remembering them more specifically in my adult years than I do the ones that just let me by with everything. Like, I don't know. So that one kind of caught me here a little bit.
Might be because I have heard the saying, but I don't know how old it is that experience is the strictest of all teachers, for it gives the test first and the lesson afterwards. Which, depending what you mean, because obviously that doesn't seem like strict, that just seems like cruel. And that might have been like a nice way of saying cruel, as opposed to actually what we would call strict today.
But I think the word is probably closer to strict than, because cruel is a very specific word in Hebrew. Mara says that she was confused about the 3 crowns because it seems somewhat hierarchical with royalty and the priesthood and Torah, right? It kind of goes back to that that question of what are we learning Torah from? Are we learning Torah to learn Torah? Are we learning Torah to be good people? And I think it's and a lot of Pirkei Avot is about this too, that like Torah is wonderful, and the priesthood is wonderful even though we don't have a temple anymore. It was wonderful theoretically, and someday should the Messiah come, we'll have we'll have our own sovereign place to be, and there'll be royalty, and that'll be lovely. But being a mensch, being a decent human being is more important than all of those things. Right? More important than being learned or royal or what's the word? Holier than thou. I'm someone who has trouble prioritizing and scheduling out my time. And so today, Rabbi Tarfon is sticking out to me. The day is short and the work is long. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. And I'm always finding that divide to be really, really tricky because I know I have to get my work done, but does it have to get done today? And what things do have to get done today? And what things can I actually wait for tomorrow for? And that's for me like a constant struggle, but it's validating to see that in text. All right. Well, thank you for learning with me today. I always enjoy learning Talmud. I think next time I'd love to begin with learning this little story, It Is Not in Heaven. It's really another lovely story about what is Talmud, what is Talmud and how does it interact with Torah. And then next time, in the weeks before Passover, we're going to learn about the high holidays, which happen in October this year. So we're going to jump ahead in the year and learn about the high holidays, which I absolutely love. And so I look forward to learning with you then. Thanks for learning with me today.
Thank you.
Rabbi Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if I can ask you something in private afterwards, if that's okay.
Afterwards, I'm gonna clean up because I like leaving at the same time as everyone else. But
Okay, gotcha.
if you have my cell phone number, you're welcome to call me. Do you want me to private message you?
Yes, please.
Here, let me
It was just about like finding a conservative rabbi, but I can make a meeting on I think you gave me your card.
that would be great. So let me give you
Awesome.
I'll give you let me give you the meeting ID because it's getting a little bit late. But
Sweet.
please make a meeting with me. I'd love to talk to you. Haven't seen you in a while.